Okay. So students, this is SPPU assignment 8.4, which can be called as FPGA LCD interfacing or simply LCD FPGA interfacing. That means we are going to interface the peripheral or the hardware LCD to our FPGA IC. Now interfacing of LCD with hardware is not new, because even in your years you must have studied how to interface an LCD display with microcontrollers such as PIC, ARM, ATmega, etc. So here the only difference between that and this is, in place of microcontroller I have the FPGA IC, while the LCD display remains the same. Now you are also aware that whenever you want to display some characters on an LCD display, you have to pass characters in the ASCII form. This is well known. So instead of passing the ASCII codes for the characters which we want to display on the LCD, we are going to send those same ASCII codes corresponding to the characters by writing them in our MVM or the VSGL model. So the first block diagram is a very simple generic interfacing, and the arrow which is going from FPGA to LCD simply indicates that FPGA is driving the LCD. There is no signal which is coming from LCD to the FPGA as an acknowledgement signal. So whatever communication is going to happen, that is going to be one-sided, unidirectional, and that too from FPGA IC to the LCD. Now coming to the second diagram, we know that this particular rectangle which is written as FPGA IC now takes a broader form with more details. So here we can see the same rectangle is expanded here, and we are seeing many things inside the block, and we are seeing many things to the left and right of the block. Now to the left of the block, so please understand one thing, that this particular rectangle, it represents my FPGA IC or the hardware, and we know that the MVM, it represents the FPGA IC. MVM means main VSGL model. So LCD displays remains the same, but now instead of the plain block FPGA IC, I am representing that with MVM. So MVM represents the FPGA hardware. Now students, understand one thing, that LCD displays have standard inputs. So we can see here that LCD display has basically three kinds of inputs. One is the data input, second is the RS, and third is the EN. So whichever programmable device wants to display characters on the LCD display, that particular device, may it be microcontroller, may it be FPGA, it must generate three signals. One is the 8-bit data inputs, RS, and EN or enable. That is why we have to write the MVM in such a way that the FPGA outputs the 8 data bits for the LCD display. It also generates the RS input for LCD display and the enable signal for LCD display. So the three inputs of LCD display, that is data, RS, and EN, the three inputs will naturally become the three outputs of my FPGA. That is why in the MVM, when we see that, we should be able to see in the entity declaration of MVM the three signals: LCD underscore data, which drives the 8 data input pins of the LCD display. You should see LCD underscore RS, the second output signal, and we should also see one more signal called as LCD underscore FSM. Got the point? So this was about the inputs required by the LCD display and the same inputs becoming the outputs of my FPGA IC. Coming to the left of my MVM, we have the RST signal and we have the clock signal. Got the point? So in the entity declaration for MVM, I should be able to see RST and clock. Now, whatever signals I'm mentioning here, you should be able to see all those signals with the same names in the MVM for LCD when I flash it. So RST as an input, CLK as an input, LCD underscore data as 8-bit output, LCD underscore RS as also a single bit output, and LCD underscore EN as the enable. Got the point? So now understand one thing, that take an example of an ALU. So ALU is a system which will perform 8 different kinds of operations between 4-bit operand A and another 4-bit operand B according to the value of function bus from 000 to 111. Got the point? Now we do the synthesis, we write a test bench, we do the simulation also. But then when we come to the point of implementing this ALU onto hardware, that is FPGA, there's a different kind of thing which happens. So for that, what we will do is that we will see how the kit looks like and how we have to decide that from where the input A will come, input B will come, the function bus will come, and where the output vector Y and the carry underscore borrow output will be shown. That is why we go to our manual and see how the manual looks like. So this is the manual of the kit which we have in the lab. The kit looks from the top view in this way, and we can see here that this is my FPGA IC. I do not know what happened. Just a minute. Okay, let it finish. Yeah, so we can see here, this is a top view of my FPGA kit available in lab, and this FPGA is supposed to be programmed as 4-bit ALU, as a USR, as a FIFO, or as a device which is going to drive my LCD display here. Got the point? So understand one thing, that if I want to program this FPGA chip as a 4-bit ALU, this ALU is having 3 inputs: the 4-bit input A, the second 4-bit input B, the function bus F 3-bit, the output carry underscore borrow, and the output vector Y. So now the question comes that once I download that MVM into the FPGA, FPGA will have the intelligence to behave or function as a 4-bit ALU. But then where will the inputs A, B and F come, and where will the outputs C underscore B and Y be shown? That is why we have to understand that all the input signals, so all the signals which are defined as input in the entity declaration, have to be applied to an FPGA through switches, and all the signals which are defined as outputs in the entity declaration must be displayed on LEDs. So we can see here in this kit we have many different ways in which we can apply input. So we can see a red colored. So these are 32 dip switches which are divided as 4 banks. So this is bank number 1 having 8 switches, bank number 2 another 8, bank number 3 another 8, and bank number 4 another 8. So totally 4 banks will have 32 dip switches, and these switches which are shown in white in color, when the switch is to the right, it generates a logic 0, and when this switches to the left, it generates a logic 1. That means I have to decide that which of the switches will supply the operand A, A3, A2, A1, A0, the operand B, B3, B2, B1, B0, the function bus F2, F1, F0, and corresponding to these 32 switches, we have 32 LEDs which are multiplexed with the inputs. So I have to decide that which LED will display my C underscore B output, and which 4 LEDs will display my output vector Y, which represents sum or difference. So we have to tell the FPGA in a particular way that these 4 switches will supply the operand A, these 4 switches will supply the operand B, these 3 switches will supply the function bus, and this LED will display the carry underscore borrow, and the last 4 switches are going to display the output Y3, Y2, Y1, Y0. So we have to tell from which switches the inputs will come and on which LEDs I will display the outputs. This is done in a special kind of a file called as a UCF file, or user constraints file. The user constraints file, it has the information that which input is going to come from where and which output is going to be displayed on which LED. So this information is given on page number 9 of the manual. some problem. So we go to page number 9, and on page number 9, okay. So page number 9, we have what is called as an LED and dip switch interface. And this particular table tells us that which switch is connected to which pin number of the FPGA. So P stands for pin. So this is the first switch TL1. So it is said that the first switch in the switch bank is connected to pin number 205 of FPGA. The second switch is connected to pin number 206. That means what? Because the switches and LEDs are multiplex. That means what? If I want to use the first LED, the pin number is same P205. So for the first switch and first LED, both of them are connected to pin number 205 of FPGA in a multiplex fashion. Similarly, the last switch of the bank as well as the last LED are connected to pin number 153 of an FPGA in a multiplex fashion. That is why if suppose I decide that my operand A is going to come from first four switches, then I have to map A3 to pin number 205 and A0 to pin 200. Similarly, if I say that the four switches from second bank are going to be operand B, then I have to map B3 to pin number 192, B0 to 190. If I decide that from the third bank my function bus is going to come, then my F bracket 2 is mapped to pin 179 and F bracket 0 is going to be mapped to 177. Similarly, if I decide that my first LED of the fourth bank is going to show me C underscore B, then I will map the output C underscore B to pin number 165. Similarly, the output Y3, Y2, Y1 and Y0 will be mapped to pin number 161, 162, 160 and 153 respectively. This is called as pin locking, and this pin locking is done using a special tool called as plan ahead, which I am not teaching because currently we are not going to do downloading. So I am telling you all these things because you should know that okay fine that I am going to convert my FPGA after downloading into ALU, into USR, into FIFO and into a system which is going to drive my LCD display. Now students, in ALU we did not have reset, we did not have clock. In ALU we did not have reset and we did not have clock, but in USR we have reset and clock. So just like I told you, just the way that I told you that my static inputs like A, B and function bus are going to be applied through the dip switches, but there is a different way of applying RST and clock signals. I am again repeating that whichever signals we define as inputs in the entity declaration of MVM, those signals should come from some input sources. Got the point? Similarly, the signals which we define as outputs in the entity declaration, those outputs must be displayed on some LEDs on the kit. Now the question comes, in USR I have reset and clock. In FIFO I have reset and clock. Similarly in LCD FPGA interface also have reset and clock. So just like in ALU, A, B and F are coming from dip switches, where will my reset come from and where will my clock come from? Students, please understand that whenever we want to give inputs such as reset, which are asynchronous, which are random and which are instantaneous, such inputs are always given through push button switches and never through dip switches. So reset and preset are examples of inputs which are asynchronous, they are instantaneous and they are random. So for that we use the push button switches. There are 8 push button switches available on the kit, and these push button switches are also known as push to on switches. That means what? They are on when they are pressed. That means what? When this push button switch is not pressed, it generates a logic 0. and when I press it, or as long as the switch is pressed, that switch generates a logic 1. That means what? Reset and preset can be given to these switches. So now we should know that suppose if I want to give my reset signal through the first push button switch, I should know that this push button switch is connected to which pin of the FPGA. So we will go to page number 11, and here I am having information called as push button interface. So as I told you that the 8 switches are given names K0 to K7, and the first push button switch is connected to pin number 204, and the last push button switch is connected to pin number 159. So if suppose I want to apply the reset to my USR, FIFO or our assignment, and if I decide that I am going to use the first push button for giving the reset input, then I have to map the RST signal to pin number 204. Now the question comes that my system has a clock. So where will my clock come from? So which are the clock sources available on the kit is given on page number 24. So we can see here clock sources. So here students, there are 6 different kinds of clocks available. The first is a 12 megahertz clock, second is 7.5 megahertz, third is 15 megahertz, fourth is 30 megahertz, fifth is 32 kilohertz, and sixth is 555 timer. And all these 6 clock sources are connected to pin number 80, 78, 77, 83, 75 and pin number 132. So depending upon which clock frequency I want to apply as a clock to my system, I can map my CLK signal to that particular pin. So now if I have decided that I am going to use my 12 megahertz clock source, that means in the user constraints file, I have to map the signal CLK to pin number 80. So in essence, if I decide I want to apply 12 megahertz clock to my system, in the UCF file, I have to map or I have to lock the CLK signal to pin 80. If I decide that I am going to use this push button switch as reset, then I have to map my RST signal in the UCF to pin number 204. Is it clear till now? This is called as pin locking. So I have to tell the FPGA that from which switches my inputs are going to come, from which clock source my CLK signal is going to come, and from which push button switch my reset is going to come. That is called as UCF file. So I will explain the UCF file from this perspective after some time. Okay, so this was about how to download the model into the FPGA and also tell the FPGA that from which switches my inputs will come and on which LEDs my outputs are going to go. Now, in order to appreciate the contents of UCF file, I will open the UCF file and I will show you the pin assignments in the kit for LCD FPGA interface. Okay, so in the manual we can see the page number. So LCD interface is at pin number 6, page number 6. Go to page number 6 and see here. Okay, so the chapter is LCD 16x2 interface, interfacing diagram, and we can see here. You see here, this is very clear now. So my LCD display needs the 8 data inputs, data 0 to data 7, and these 8 input lines on the PCB are hardwired to pin number 47, 41 up to pin number 24. Similarly, the RS input of LCD display is connected to pin number 48 of FPGA. Similarly, the EN or the display enable input is connected to pin number 49. The same thing is given here. Okay, so that means what? Whichever output signal in FPGA or whichever signal I define as output in entity declaration of MVM, and if that signal is going to drive the RS input of the LCD display, then I have to map that signal to pin number 48. Similarly, the output signal which is going to drive my display enable, that particular signal has to be mapped to pin number 49. Similarly, as I told you here in our block diagram, we are telling that the output signal LCD underscore data is going to drive the 8 input lines of the LCD display. That means what? That particular output, the 8 bits of that particular output have to be mapped to pin number 47 to pin number 24. Now I will show you the contents of UCF file. You can open this UCF file with Notepad. And now you'll be able to appreciate the contents. Okay, so we are seeing here, this is pin locking. So we can see here, this is the syntax for pin locking. The keyword net space in double quotes the signal name, LOC stands for location equal to P80. That means what? There is an input signal in my entity declaration with the name clock underscore 12 megahertz and it is locked to pin number 80. Why? Because the 12 megahertz clock source is connected to pin number 80 of FPGA. Similarly, I have written net space double quotes RST, location is P204. And who is connected to pin number 204 of FPGA? The first push button switch K0. Similarly, we can see here my output signal LCD underscore RS. So what I will do, I will simultaneously open my MVM also in the ISE project. Okay. So this is my ISE project file. I will double click so that you can see that how the input and output signals are properly mapped in the UCF file in a particular manner. So this is my MVM, that is a main VHDL model. Just a minute.
कल लेके आना है प्रॉब्लम है
Yeah, so students, we can see from line number 7 to line number 13, we have the entity declaration and we can see RST is defined as input, clock underscore 12 megahertz is defined as an input. And we can see in UCF file also the RST signal is mapped to P204. Similarly, the clock is now given the name as CLK underscore 12 megahertz. So we have been using the signal name CLK for clock in both USR and in FIFO, but here we have used a different name because we want to indicate that this clock is having a frequency 12 megahertz. So instead of CLK, I have used CLK underscore 12 megahertz. So this input signal is also mapped to pin number 80. Similarly, we are seeing that we have defined LCD underscore RS as output signal, which is going to drive the RS input of the display. LCD underscore EN is the output signal, which is going to drive the EN input of the display. And we have the 8-bit output LCD underscore data, which is going to drive the data lines data 0 to data 7 of the display. And we can see here that all the input and output signals are mapped in the UCF file like this. So LCD underscore RS is P48. Why? Because the RS input of the display is connected to pin 48 of FPGA. So LCD underscore RS output will be sent through pin number 48 to the display. LCD underscore EN output signal will be sent through pin number 49 to the EN input of the display. Similarly, the ASCII codes for the characters which we want to display, the ASCII codes will be sent through the signal LCD underscore data or through pin number 47 to pin number 24 to the data inputs of the LCD. I hope that the UCF file is crystal clear now. Now, coming to our code, before I speak about the code, I want to tell you something that this is the first MVM in which you are seeing more than one processes. Because if you see carefully, in the MVM for ALU, there was a single process which was sensitive to A, B and F. The MVM for USR was having a single process which was sensitive to RST, clock, serial in, parallel in and mode. In FIFO, again we can see that we had a single process. So till now we have never come across MVMs wherein there are multiple processes in the architecture body. So architecture body of ALU was having a single process. Architecture body for USR was having a single process. The architecture body for FIFO is also having a single process. But LCD FPGA interfacing MVM is an example of an architecture body in which we are not using 2 but we are using 3 processes. So we see here, I will float this so I can explain you the model line by line. Very simple here. Line number 2 to line number 5 is our library section as usual. Line number 7 to line number 13 is my entity declaration. And from line number 15 down to line number 123, I have my architecture body. Okay, so now we go to the architecture body, and you know that architecture body has always two sections. One is called as a declaration section and second is logic section. So the space between the first line of architecture, that is line number 15, and the architectures begin line number 24 is called as the declaration section. So the first line of architecture is on line number 15 and the architectures begin is line number 24. So whatever we write after line number 15 and before line number 24 is called as the declaration section. So declaration section here, it goes from line number 17 to line number 22. Now everything which is written after the architectures begin and before end architecture is called as the logic section. So a logic section, it starts after line number 24 and it goes before line number 123. So everything from line number 26 to line number 121 is the logic section of the architecture body. Now again, if we go inside the logic section of architecture body, we can see that we are seeing the keyword process in three places. We are seeing the keyword process on line number 27. We are again seeing another process at line number 41 and we are seeing another process at line number 52. So whenever we see the keyword process, there has to be an end process with it. So process end process is the first process from line number 27 to line number 36. Then the second process starts at line number 41 and ends at line number 49. Similarly, the third process starts at line number 52 and goes all the way to line number 116. Got the point? So these are the three processes which we are there. Okay. Now every process has a different function to perform. So we will see that the first process, which is from line number 27 to 36, what is the task it is performing? What is the task performed by the second process from line number 41 to 49? And what is the task of the third process, which goes from line number 52 to line number 116? Now, so here line number 7 to line number 13 entity declaration, it defines the input signals RST, clock underscore 12 megahertz, and three outputs LCD underscore RS, LCD underscore EN, and LCD underscore data, which are 1 bit and 8-bit output signals. Coming to the declaration part, which is between line number 15 and line number 24. On line number 17, we have defined one signal called as div, which is a 16-bit signal. We will come to explain why it is defined as a 16-bit vector. Line number 18 defines two more signals, that is clock underscore FSM and LCD underscore RS underscore S. Similarly, line number 20 and 21 are special because on line number 20, we are creating a new data type. So this data type is having the name state, and this data type can have these values: reset, func, mode, cur, clear, D0, D1, D2, D3, D4 and hold. So on line number 20, okay. So on line number 20, I am creating a new data type whose name is state, and this is the set of values which it can have. Line number 21, I am defining two signals, PS1 and NX, which are belonging to the new data type created on line number 20. We have seen this concept of creating a new data type and defining signals belonging to those data types when we learned how to do VHDL modeling of state machines. If you remember the state diagram, it was a Murray machine, and this state machine was going through 4 states A, B, C and D. Now in VHDL language, there is no data type which can actually hold values such as A, B, C and D because they are alphabets. So in that particular example, we had created a new data type called as state name. So we had written type state name is parenthesis A, B, C, D semicolon, and then in the immediately next line we had defined a signal called as signal space state space colon state name. So in the first line we have created the new data type called as state name, and in the next line we always define signals belonging to the new data type. That same thing we have done here. In line number 20, I have created a new data type whose name is state, and in parentheses I have written which are the different values that this data type can accommodate. Line number 21, I have defined 2 signals. The first signal is PS1, second signal is NX, and they are belonging to the data type state which is created on line number 20. Now line number 22, I am defining one more signal called as data out underscore S, which is having the same size as my output signal LCD underscore data. So these are all dummy signals. So clock underscore FSM, LCD underscore RS underscore S, and data out underscore S. These are all examples of dummy signals, and dummy signals are always handled within the process, and after coming out of the process, these dummy signals values are assigned to the final output. That is why we can see that this dummy signal data out underscore S, it is assigned to this output signal LCD underscore data way down in our model here. You can see here line number 121, I am assigning the dummy signal data out underscore S to my entity declarations output signal LCD underscore data. Similarly, this particular dummy signal LCD underscore RS underscore S, this dummy signal is assigned to my output signal LCD underscore RS, which I have defined here on line number 10 of the entity declaration. And similarly, we can see that on line number 119, I have assigned the signal clock underscore FSM to my output signal LCD underscore EN. So basically we can see here that LCD underscore EN is driven by the signal LCD underscore clock underscore FSM. So clock underscore FSM dummy signal, it drives LCD underscore EN. LCD underscore RS underscore S dummy signal, it drives output signal LCD underscore RS, and the dummy signal data out underscore S, it drives my output signal LCD underscore data. Now we come to the point of explaining what are the different functions performed by all 3 processes. So student just see here line number 27 to line number 36 is my first process, and just see what this process is doing. It is sensitive to reset signal and a 12 megahertz clock. Process begin. If reset equal to 1, then div gets, others get 0. What is div? Div is defined as a 16-bit vector. So I am telling that if reset comes as 1, then this 16-bit vector, I'm very sorry, it is 16-bit. So div is a 16-bit vector, and I have written on line number 29 that if reset equal to 1, then I have to make that 16-bit vector as 16 zeros. Else if, that means if reset comes as 0, then I have to look for the rising edge of the clock. So this is a statement which is another way of expressing rising edges. So till now in USR and in FIFO, whenever you wanted to check the arrival of rising edge or falling edge, we have always written statements like falling underscore edge bracket CLK, or if I wanted to detect the rising edge, I have written rising underscore edge bracket clock. Got the point? Okay, so another way of writing rising underscore edge bracket clock is to write clock tick event and clock equal to 1. Instead of this, if I write down clock tick event and clock equal to 0, it will be an equivalent of writing falling underscore edge. So better let us stick to our original way of writing rising and falling edges. So originally we have defined a rising edge. So I will replace the entire thing with writing rising underscore edge bracket, and my signal is CLK underscore 12, and it is MHZ. Okay, right? So I have defined that if reset comes as 1, initialize this 16-bit vector to 16 zeros. Else if means if reset comes as 0, then wait for the rising edge of the 12 megahertz clock. So rising underscore edge bracket CLK underscore 12 megahertz parenthesis then if reset does not come, and as soon as the rising edge of 12 megahertz clock comes, then increment the 16-bit vector by 1. So basically the process number 1 implements a 16-bit up counter. I repeat that process number 1, it implements a 16-bit up counter. If you remember, we had written VHDL models for counters. If the counter is a 4-bit counter, we had defined a signal called as Q out standard logic vector 3 down to 0. And in the declaration section, we had defined a signal called as QTemp, which was again 4-bit. And we had written process parenthesis RST comma CLK begin. If RST equal to 1, then QTemp gets others get 0. Else if rising underscore edge bracket clock, then QTemp gets QTemp plus 1, end if end process. And we had written outside the process Q is assigned QTemp. Got the point? The same kind of concept is here. So the first process is nothing but a process which actually performs the function of frequency division. Got the point? Now I will prove to you that why in the block diagram I have written that 183 megahertz. So students, this which is from line number 27 to 38. So the process ends at line number 36, but after coming out of the process, I am assigning the MSB bit of the 16-bit vector div to the signal clock underscore FSM. So why I have done this? I have done this for doing frequency division. So students, this in this block diagram, this process number 1, it represents the first block clock division process. The second process, which is from line number 41 to 49, is nothing but this particular block, that is state machine process. And the third process, which goes from line number 52 to line number 116, is nothing but my third process, that is the ASCII code process. So we have the first process, clock division process, the second process is the state machine process, and third is ASCII code process. And here I have shown a connection between my first process and the second process, and the connection between the first process and second process is the signal called as LCD underscore FSM. And this particular signal has a frequency of 183 Hertz. Okay, how? See, now my first process is sensitive to 12 megahertz clock, and let us find out that if a particular counter is driven by a frequency F, I repeat, if an n-bit up counter, is driven by a clock having frequency F, what is the frequency of its MSB bit? The explanation is here. Okay, so if you go here, I have given an explanation of a 3-bit up counter here. So consider a 3-bit up counter which goes from 000 to 111. The outputs are Q2, Q1 and Q0. And if we draw the waveforms for this counter, we can see that the first waveform is the clock waveform, and I have shown the falling edges of the clock because my counter is negative edge triggered. And then we have the waveforms for the LSB bit Q0, the middle bit Q1 and the MSB bit Q2. And we can see by waveform analysis that the bit Q0, when it completes one cycle, the clock completes 2 cycles. That means the frequency of Q0 is F upon 2. Similarly, we see that when the bit Q1 completes 1 cycle, the clock has completed 4 cycles. That means the frequency of the bit Q1 is clock frequency upon 4. Similarly, we see that when the MSB bit Q2, it completes 1 cycle, the clock has completed 8 cycles. That means the frequency of Q2 is F by 8. So in a 3-bit counter, the LSB bit is at a frequency F by 2, the next bit is at f by 4 and the MSB bit is at f by 8. Now similarly, if we extend this understanding to an n bit counter having n outputs, that is Q0, Q1, Q2, Q3 up to Qn minus 1, where Q0 is LSB and Qn minus 1 is MSB, then we can see that the frequencies are the bit Q0 is at f upon 2, Q1 is f upon 4, Q2 is f upon 8, Q3 is f upon 16. Similarly, the last bit or the MSB bit is at frequency f upon 2 raised to n. Got the point? That means what? In our case, we have defined a 16-bit vector div. In the first process, I am incrementing the 16-bit vector by 1 every falling edge of the clock. So the question is that if I am assigning div 15, that is the MSB bit of the 16-bit counter to clock underscore FSM, what is the value of this particular bit? The answer lies here. So my counter is a 16-bit counter. It is negative edge trigger and it is having a clock having frequency 12 megahertz, and I have my output bits Q15 up to Q0. So Q0 is f by 2. So what is the frequency of Q15? So according to this explanation, the frequency of Q15 is f Q15 will be equal to frequency of the clock upon 2 raised to 16, which is equal to 12 megahertz upon 65,536, which is equal to 183 hertz. That is why students, in the block diagram here I have told that the output of the first process, which is LCD underscore FSM, is 183 hertz. Why I have shown a connection between the first and second process through LCD underscore FSM? It is here. So the MSB bit of the 16-bit counter is assigned to clock underscore FSM. So clock underscore FSM signal is having the frequency 183 hertz. Go to the second process, which goes from line number 41 to line number 49. Just see the sensitivity list. So the first process is sensitive to the reset and the 12 megahertz clock, and the second process is sensitive to reset and the signal clock underscore FSM. That means the 183 hertz signal. So we can see, because the output of the first process is the signal clock underscore FSM, and this signal is present in the sensitivity list of the second process. That is why we say that the connection between process number 1 and process number 2 is the signal clock underscore FSM. Got the point? So the output of first process is the signal clock underscore FSM on line number 38, and because the second process is sensitive to the signal clock underscore FSM, that is why I am telling that here there is a connection. Okay. Now one thing which I did not do here is that I should also show the RST signal here. Got the punch? A clock is given here and plus. So this clock, we can see here this clock signal. So what I will do, I will change it to clock underscore 12 megahertz. So CLK underscore 12 megahertz. Okay, so this is the signal. So clock underscore 12 megahertz is a signal which is having a frequency 12 megahertz, and it is given to clock process number 1, which is doing frequency division, but it is not given to process number 2. And this reset signal also comes here. Okay, so the reset signal is given to process number 1 and process number 2, because here in the sensitivity list of the first process we have reset, and in the SL for the second process also we have reset. The first process is sensitive to clock underscore 12 megahertz. That is why I have given this clock underscore 12 megahertz signal to the first process, but I have not given it to second process. Second process is sensitive to both RST and clock underscore FSM. We can see here it is sensitive to reset as well as clock underscore FSM. LCD underscore FSM, very sorry. Now the second process which goes from line number 41 to 49, it is performing the task of state machine process. That means it is writing that if reset equal to 1, then PS1 gets reset. Now what is PS1? PS1 is a signal which is defined as belonging to the data type state, and the data type state can have one of these values. So what I've written here, I've written if reset equal to 1, then the signal PS1 gets reset. What is reset? Reset is one of the values of the data type called as state. Else if rising underscore edge, clock underscore FSM, then PS1 gets NX. What is NX? NX is another signal which is belonging to the data type state. So both PS1 and NX can have any of these values from reset to hold and anything in between. So here I have written rising underscore edge bracket clock underscore FSM. So here in process number 1, the 16-bit counter is incrementing itself every falling edge of 12 megahertz clock. And here my state machine is going from the state PS1 to NX for every rising edge of the 183 hertz clock. That is why the second process is responsible for deciding the next state of the state machine. Come to process number 3, line number 52 to line number 116. So we can see here that on line number 52, I have defined that the process is sensitive to the PS1. What is PS1? Again, PS1 is a dummy signal belonging to the data type state, which can have any of these values. And here PS1 is defined here that whenever the rising edge of the 183 hertz signal clock underscore FSM comes, you have to go to the next state. And then from line number 54 to line number 115, I have defined a state machine. So we can see here case PS1 is, okay, so case PS1 is when reset, then NX is assigned func and the RS input is assigned 0. And we can see here there are certain ASCII codes written. So this is an ASCII stream which corresponds to 38 hex. So 38 hex means what? 38 hex corresponds to 16 3s are 48 plus 8 56. So this particular stream 0011 1000 is 38 hex, but in decimal it is 16 3s are 48 plus 8, that is 56. Similarly, we have 06x. So 0000110 is 0 and 6, and 06 hex means it is 6 decimal. Similarly, we can see here, students, on line number 83, I have written data out underscore s is assigned 0101 and 0000. So what is 0101 and 0000? It is basically 50 hex, and 50 hex corresponds to 80 decimal. And if you see the ASCII chart for the character P, capital P has a value 80 decimal, which is nothing but hex 50. Similarly, the second character, if I want to display is I, so I have to say I is 73 in the character table, and 73 corresponds to 49 hexadecimal. That is why for displaying the character I on the LCD display, I have written 0100, that is 4 and 949. Similarly, the character C has a character value of 67, and 67 corresponds to hexadecimal 43. Similarly, whichever character I want to display on the LCD display, I have written the equivalent hexadecimal code corresponding to the decimal value in the character chart. As you know that uppercase ABCD goes from 65 to 90 and lowercase ABCD goes from 97 to 122. That same thing which you may have studied in your previous years, we have done that same thing here. Okay. Last but not the least, after the state machine process is over, line number 119, 120 and 121 are actually assigning the dummy signals to my final outputs. So clock underscore FSM, which is 183 hertz signal and is also the output of process number 1 written on line number 38. It is assigned to the signal LCD underscore EN. So the enable pin of the LCD display is getting 183 Hertz clock. The RS input of the LCD display is getting LCD underscore RS underscore S dummy signal, and the data inputs data 0 to data 7 of the display are getting nothing but data out underscore S. And what is data out underscore S? It is all defined in the state machine, which is expressed in process number 3. Now we come to the final part of synthesis and simulation. We will open the MVM here. I will dock it. We will synthesize it and show that yes, there are no errors and there are no warnings also. It is synthesized. If you see the RTL schematic, you go inside and we have counters and some logic. Inside, okay. There is nothing below this. Technology schematic. Go inside, zoom to full view, and we have a whole network of LUTs and gates. Close this, close this. Go to simulation mode, open the test bench. No need to go into the details of this test bench. Delete the comments here, because if you know how a test bench is written, then by reading the test bench you will come to know what logic we have used here. Students, very simple. Select the test bench, do check syntax, and once you get a tick mark here, simulate behavior mode. But students, please understand one thing. There is a difference in the way you run the test bench of this assignment and the way you run the test bench of the previous assignments. Let us open a previous assignment, say ALU 4_8, MVM, simulation. We have the test bench, check syntax, and you just run it like this. You just say run, and after you say run, and once you get the waveforms, you do not touch the simulation scale. So once it opens, you say right click float, you say zoom to full view, and when you say zoom to full view, according to the operands given here, we will get different results for addition, subtraction, and the 6 logical operations. So students, please remember this thing, that whenever you run the test bench for ALU, USR or FIFO, you do not do any change in the parameter written here. The default parameter written here is 1 microseconds, which we do not touch for all 3 assignments before, but here you have to touch it. I will show you how. So first we will run the test bench of our LCD FPG interface in a normal way, and we will see that we will not get the results as expected. So open the test bench, check syntax, and now I will run it. Run the test bench. And what we are expected to see, students, we are expecting to see these codes. Okay, so when I run the test bench, for the output LCD underscore data, we should see these ASCII codes: 38 hex, 06 hex, 0C hex, 01 hex, and also 50, 49, 43, 54, 20, and null, that is 00. We are expecting to see all these hexadecimal codes in my waveform. But here, when I say float and when I say zoom to full view, we are not seeing anything. We are deleting this signal, period, delete. And when I say zoom to full view, students, I am not seeing anything. I will change the radix of the output LCD underscore data from binary to hexadecimal. So after doing this thing, I am able to see only one code, that is 38. And when I do like this, I am able to see only 38. So we are expecting to see other ASCII code. So what you should do, you should change the simulation time from 1 microseconds to simply 1s, that is 1 seconds. And as soon as you do this, then the simulation will start running. Okay, we can see here, and we can see if we do zoom, we are able to see all the ASCII codes. See here. Okay, 38, 06, 0C, 01, 50. So 50 hexadecimal corresponds to the character P, 49 corresponds to character I, 43 corresponds to character C, and 54 corresponds to character T, and 20 is 32, and 32 is space, and after space we have 00, that is null. Okay, so 38, 06, 0, C, 1, 50, 49, everything we are seeing as per what we have written in the MVM. So there is a difference in the way that you run the test benches of ALU, USR and FIFO, wherein you do not touch the simulation time of 1 microsecond, but when you want to do the simulation of this assignment, then you have to do the simulation for only 1 second. So students, this was all about the LCD_FPG assignment. There is nothing more to be explained and known by the student from both submission as well as the exam viewpoint.